was aware of the fact that I needed to build relationships with anybody I was doing business. And this is a guy I wasn't comfortable with. And I don't think there was anything that I could have said or done to ever cross that threshold to build a relationship.
Welcome to Dream Big with Big Dreamers, conversations for career growth, inspiration, and insight. It's time to dream big. My guest today is Ron Levine, president of Graphic Press Inc., a pioneer in graphic and printing design with over 50 years of experience. He's partnered with the legendary Clio Awards, leads investment classics, and is a true entrepreneur with passions ranging from classic cars to signed memorabilia. Ron is also a longtime client and friend, and I've had the privilege of watching him navigate the twists and turns of multiple industries and come out on top again and again. Ron, welcome to Dream Big with Big Dreamers.
Thank you, Donna. It's my pleasure. We have had a long history, and it's nice to be able
We
to
have.
meet face to face in this capacity and share a story or two.
I love it. Ron, let's get started. And my first question to you is, when was the first time you remember dreaming big, and how did it shape who you are today?
Well, we did not grow up with a lot of money when I was a kid, and of course, you're still very much aware of people's what they have and what we don't have. And I would say that really is the first experience I would have with dreaming. I mean, I've always wanted to dress well, and I couldn't. I always wanted to have that classic car, which I couldn't then, but fortunately I can now. But I would say those are, the first childhood dreams, if you will, that morphed into adult reality. Um, that was the first time I would think.
Now, you've said that one day back in 1972, everything changed completely with your career direction. Would you share that story with
I would
us? What
love. I,
happened and what did you learn?
I was in graphic design, as you alluded to, and graphic design was a very specialty, even in the 70s. You had to design a piece and hope the customer liked what if you created their vision of what they were trying to communicate. It was all magic marker and pencil drawings. There was no Photoshop. It never existed, much less internet. But I did meet a friend of mine whose father had a printing company. And he says, and he was actually using me as a freelance designer. But he once told me, he says, when someone you design a piece for somebody, they need you once. But in the printing business, once I print it and they need 5,000 pieces 6 months from now, they're going to do it again. They don't need you, they need me. And that made good
Mm.
sense to me. So I decided to go out and try and sell printing. I didn't really know a lot about printing. I knew design, which was a good foundation for understanding print, but I didn't understand print at all. And he basically threw me out into the street and said, there was no internet. You basically called on people, knocking on doors, and doing the best you could.
Yeah.
I had just gotten married. We lived in an area of Chicago, in the northwest side of Chicago, and I naturally went in my backyard and started knocking on doors. I didn't know who was going to print and who wasn't, and it was frustrating. It was difficult because I got a lot of no's. And I went back to my friend, who was, I guess, my boss. I mean, at the time, and he said, "How'd you do?"
Mhm.
I said, "I just can't get in the door anywhere." And he said, "Well, how many calls have you made?" And I said, "Oh, 10, 12." He says, "Good. It takes about 10 to get a yes." So he said, "Just go out there and do it again. You're due." Anyway,
Yeah.
I found a company which was 10 square blocks. I mean, it was a big corporate. It was Bell and Howell. I don't mind if they're not in business today, so I can share the name. And I walked into this Bell and Howell corporate headquarters. And on the wall, Donna, was a full wall of color brochures. I wasn't doing a lot of color printing in the 70s. So not only was this
Yeah.
a lot of printing, it was color printing. And I thought to
Yeah.
myself, this is it. This is the account. You're meant to be here. This is the one you got to call on.
You
And
heard ka-ching.
well, yeah, I mean, it was I mean, boy, this is it. I mean, just look at all the printing they're doing. And so I find out the guy's name, his also name was, I won't give his last name, but the same name as me. And I thought to myself, well, that's Indian. And of course, I went to the receptionist. I said, could I, talk to him? He said, no, you have to make an appointment. I said, okay, that's understandable. certainly happened many times. And I called up and I said, Ron, my name is Ron Levine. I could do this and I could do that. I talked to you about your printing. He said, then never call me again. He hung up the phone. Just like
Oh my
that.
goodness.
And
Yeah.
I said, well, I kind of envisioned that to be a little different. It didn't come down the way I thought it would go. But again, there's this wall of brochures, and I just couldn't get that out of my mind. So every couple of weeks, I would call him, and literally every couple of weeks, he would hang up on me. He said, I told you never to call me. Don't even bother me.
Hmm.
Okay. And now at this point in sales, you said, well, what do I have to lose? I'll just keep calling. All I have to do is keep
Yeah.
hanging up. I can't get any worse off than I am now. And I don't know if I caught him on a good day, bad day, or otherwise, but after about literally 4 months of calling, he said, Tuesday, 3:30, be here. God damn it, we'll get this over with. And I said I could make it, but he'd already hung up. Anyway, this is my version of perseverance pays off. I figured if this is what it takes to get the appointment, and again, there's no internet, you have to go see people.
Yeah.
And I went in there with my, very much encouraged by the whole thing. And I walk in, there's a receptionist there. And I said, I have an appointment. Would you please give me my card? And she says, all right, have a seat. And she gets up. I don't know, there was no telephone. I'm not, she gets up to walk to this gentleman. And I'm sort of watching. After all, I've been being hang up on for the last 3 months. I want to know what he
Hmm.
looked like. But as he takes the card and he looks at it, he tears it up and he throws it away. Now, I thought that was a little bit of, you know, sort of a disappointment. And she comes back and just says, I'm sorry, Mr. Rubin, his name. He's tied up in a meeting. Could you please make another appointment and come back? Well, the thought of making another appointment was really unappealing. It took me 3 months to get in the first place. Number one, he's in no
Yeah.
meeting. He just tore up my card. So
Yeah.
I ask people in the sales business at this point, what would you do? What would you do? And nobody really has a definitive answer. And to be quite honest with you, I didn't know what I was going to do. But I got out to the car and I thought to myself, self, this is a turning point. You can't let this guy just walk over. You have to come up with a plan. And I did.
Yeah.
And I walked back in, and the receptionist said, "Did you forget something?" I said, "Yes, I did." She said, "Well, what is it?" I said, "Well, it's a little embarrassing." Well, that got her attention. Well, what is it? Well, how can I help you? I said, "Well, I'm in the printing business." That did not impress her. She said, "So what?" I said,
Yeah.
"Well, I have about three more appointments this afternoon." She said, "Yes." I said, "I shouldn't be out of business cards, but I gave you my last card. Do me a favor." So what's that? She says, "He's in a meeting." Oh, yes. Could you get the card back off his desk? I really could use it for my next appointment. Well, of course, she didn't know what to do, knowing the fact that she tore up the card. Well. But I figured, okay, it's a chess game. Let's play chess.
Yeah.
And she goes
Yeah.
back to the guy and apparently says to him, she wants his card back. And Don, I swear, I thought for sure he'd have to say send him in because he tore up my card. And he
Yeah.
reaches in the pocket, he gives the girl something, and it's not my card. And she comes back and says, I'm sorry, he's tied up in a meeting, which is ridiculous. But
Hmm.
if it's that important to you for your card, to give you a nickel. True story. I put the nickel on the counter. Now, again, I ask any salesperson out there, what would you do?
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do, but I took the nickel. And there must be a god of printing. I'm not quite sure. But when I put the nickel in my pocket, I happened to fumble around and find the card. And then it became automatic. I pulled out the card. I said, oh, look at this. I didn't know I had this one. Do me a favor. What's that? Tell them they're two for nickel, and I wouldn't want to cheat them. I gave her another card. Okay? She thought that was funny, just as you did and I did. I thought it was, at this point, who cares? And she goes back to the guy, which to this day, his name was Erica. I gave her credit for this, and apparently says they're two for a nickel. I mean, she didn't want to be in this position any more than I wanted to put her in that position.
Yeah.
Well, this guy, and it's a nice quiet office. This is not, there are no cubicles. It's all out in the open. Stands up and he yells out the top of his lungs, send that son of a bitch in here. And I thought to myself, okay. There was another guy sitting there. I remember I said, go ahead. He must mean you. He says, I'm not going in there. So I said, all right, I'm going. And again, I walk in and I have no idea what to expect, although I know it's not going to be pleasant, I assume. And he says to me, well, to be honest with you, he said, you got balls. I said, well, thank you. I thought he meant it as a compliment. I don't think he did. He said to me, you have 3 minutes to tell me why I should do business with you, and then I want you out of here.
Yeah.
And Don, at that point, I thought I was really new in the business. I said to him, I said, you know what? Thank you. What are you thanking me for? I said, I'll tell you, I'm in the graphic arts business. I just started this business. And if I have to deal with people like you, I quit. And I meant it. I said, I just, I just about had it. And here was this huge company with all this printing. He was the guy in charge. No, thank you. I'll go back to my comfort level and just do design
Yeah.
where I really knew my way around. And I go
Mhm.
out to the car with my mindset is I'm done. I'm going to call my boss and say, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah.
Fortunately, and this is where the story gets interesting. I got into my 1968 Oldsmobile and was driving home to tell my wife I was going to be done. And you're not allowed to make a red turn at a red light in the 70s, so I had time to stew at this corner before I could make this right. And I was plenty upset. And at
Yeah.
that point, I look across the street and there's a small little building. It was called Klein Tools, and I had never even seen the building. I had just vision focused on this huge corporate. And some voice in my head said to me, "This is like falling off a horse. If you don't get back on, you'll never get back on." And I'd had
Mm.
about 10 minutes to calm down, regain my composure. And I said, "Yeah, I'll go make another phone call. I'm going to make another call." And I walked into Klein Tools, and there's no receptionist. I said, "Who buys the printing?" He says, "Tom Zimmerman." I said, "He won't see me." He says, "No." I said, "Can I give him a card?" He said, "Yes, you can." I said, "You're not going to tear it up, are you?" He says, "What?" I said, "I've had a bad day." She said, "No, he's a nice guy. Call him. He'll make an appointment with you." I said, "Well, that's encouraging," and I did. And after a couple of times, I met Tom Zimmerman, and I can honestly tell you that I've had clients sold for 52 years. I've gone through
Wow.
7 or 8 buyers. I've just retired from client tools, and I've been their main supplier for 50 years. Bell and Howell's out of business. The guy
Mhm.
Ron is fired. He got fired for taking bribes, I guess, whatever he was doing. And what goes around comes around. And so
Yeah.
that's the story of one day that perhaps changed my whole direction. I became a successful printing salesman, but I had a basis. I had client tools as a. What I learned is you need a core account to have an income, and then you can go out and make more calls. But the interesting thing that I will tell you
Yeah.
differently is we had a term called smokestack selling. Have you ever heard of that term?
No. Well, wait. I think I know what it means, but you tell me what it
There
means.
was no internet, and there was no way really of generating business that would knock on doors. So when you have a customer in a particular area, the idea was so you're not wasting a lot of time driving all over the city. Look at the smokestacks around you of that company, and they usually have their names on the smokestacks because that's the way they advertise their company. Then you would go back to
Mhm.
your office and look up that name in the yellow pages, and then you would call that company and say, "Listen, I'm doing business next door at Klein Tools. Is there any possibility when I'm in the area can I stop by and see it?" Hopefully, you'd be able to get a nucleus of things, and that's basically the way we
Yeah.
created a business. And I ended up getting another account about a half a block down, half a mile down the street that I also did business for about 25 years.
Mhm.
And I've been fortunate. But the one day sort of changed my direction. I got over the
Yeah.
obstacle of, there's idiots in the world and there's nice people, and you have to sort of get past that. And you have to sell yourself.
You know, Ron,
Go ahead.
what I love about your story is where I thought it was going.
Okay.
I thought you were going to say that you gave the best 3-minute elevator pitch of your life. Like that's where I thought you were going when he said, bring the bastard in and give me 3-minute pitch. I thought you were going to like give him the best
Yeah.
and you were going
People
to
people would
win that
always
account.
say
That's where
that
I
people,
thought you were
yeah,
going.
people would always say when I tell that
But
story, you got the account, and I said, no, it's not quite the way it worked.
yeah. So that was a really interesting twist.
Hmm.
But what I love about it is I think there's so many people out there who would have started tap dancing, for this guy's business. And you said, no, this is toxic. This is not a guy that, no matter how big this guy's business is, it's not worth it to me in terms of who I am and what I'm going to deliver. And I believe that so completely. I've always felt the people that cloak their age or cloak their orientation or cloak their beliefs, whatever it might be, so they can work at a place that doesn't respect who they are innately. Why do you want that company to do well?
You you
Why do you
you
want to?
you can't, because I mean, what I sort of felt in that moment was I was aware of the fact that I needed to build relationships with anybody I was doing business
Yeah,
with, and this is a guy I wasn't comfortable with. And I don't think there was anything I could have said or done to ever, cross that threshold to build a relationship. And if I didn't have that,
yeah,
I just wasn't comfortable enough to continue. And the truth of the matter is, perhaps in looking back, maybe I was looking for an excuse to get out. I don't know. I'd been frustrated. It wasn't going well. Um,
hmm,
I just was fortunate enough to have had time to um, calm down and have enough presence of mind to try and get back on the horse.
yeah. So it's now over 50 years later
Yes,
from that moment.
yes.
What can people today take from this story? To me, I'm hearing a few things. It's what we just talked about. Know your value and know who you want to work with. Who do you want to create those relationships with? I think that's huge. I think also, oddly enough, I think there's something about the persistence piece.
Well, I think there's no question persistence will never, ever take the place in today's world as it was 50 years ago. However, I feel that today, with the advent of internet and um, all the social media platforms that exist, I believe that it takes a much more uh, strong effort to create and want to have relationships. I still believe in my son was very successful in what he does. I've always instilled in him the idea of going out and meeting people face to face, and he has done that and
Yeah.
built his business. And I'm proud of him for doing that. And I think if there's anything that I tried to teach him, that was it. Toward the end of
Yeah.
my career, not the end of my career, but even 25 or 10 years ago when I was still doing it actively, I would call people and I'd say, I'd like to talk about your printing. Okay. Can I come and meet you? He says, what for? Well, because I can talk to you, meet you. It's not necessary. What's your website? Not my cup of tea. I was always
Yeah.
face to face. You know what? Because face to face, my strength was being able to instill confidence. I never felt I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be a supplier, Donna. I wanted to be a problem solver. I wanted to be the
Mm.
person that came in and asked them what kind of obstacles do they have and what can I do to help those and change things. There's a very different, not much of a difference. There was a difference between an order taker and a salesman.
Yeah.
An order taker strictly goes in and takes notes and says, okay, I'll get your price. And if I'm lucky enough to get the job, they're not closing. A
Yeah.
salesperson will say, well, we could do this a little differently, or I can make this better. I can save you money. We can change the paper. You don't have to do it this size. You can make it a little bit less. Make the
Mm-hmm.
suggestions, make them realize that you're looking out for, I'm talking about the buyer, their best interest. And not all about
Mm-hmm.
costs. I'm talking about the end result.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that's difficult to communicate on a web call or an internet. I've always had to be face to face to do that. I want to look at the printed samples he has printed before and ask questions about how it was done, why it was done this way, and are you open to changes and things of that nature. Hard to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to do that without being face to face in front of people. And so I would
Yeah.
encourage anybody, I don't care what profession they're in, um, to strive to have the face-to-face meeting. I know I realize that
Yeah.
in today's environment, everybody's all over the world, but whatever you can do to create a personal relationship, even if I guess there's ways to do that. I'm not sure I know how, but on the internet and things, there still has to be personality involved. There still has to be, I remember my boss would tell me when you walk into somebody's office, if they've got a fish on the wall, you're a fisherman. If you're a golf golfer, you're a golfer. The last thing you talk about is
Yeah.
printing, and that's true
Yeah.
because you don't want to just be another person coming in the door. You want to be something that they can remember, something that they can
Yeah.
relate to, and personal experience is a great way of doing it.
Yeah. Now, you've worked in so many fields, printing, music, classic, cars, green energy. Looking back, what was a moment where saying never would have limited you? And how did you move past that?
Well, I guess in the music business, I represented. I was always a musician myself, not a very good one, but nonetheless had aspirations of being one. Uh, but I played drums and percussion, and I always liked them. And I found a band. I remember it was my 50th birthday, and I always liked Gypsy King music. Just my kind,
Mm,
I just liked the music. And I found a band who was a
yeah.
cover band who did Gypsy King music, and they were playing at a club that probably held 100 people. If they didn't have 250 people in there, they didn't have one. And I went up to the front of them and I said, I met Johnny, the lead singer, and I said, "What are you guys doing Saturday?" Why? He said, "Well, I'm having a birthday party. Come to my house." And I hired them for $600, and they came to the house and they played, and I got to play with them. I think that was probably $600 fee. And we became friends, and I started representing them. And again, they were content playing a lot of club dates and doing well. They all had other jobs. It wasn't like a life changing thing. But I always had bigger dreams for that band. I thought they were great,
Yeah.
and I started putting my business skills to work in that capacity and started traveling. I traveled to Cannes several times. We were a music festival, much the same as motion picture festival. But you get anybody in the music industry, record labels, attorneys, record attorneys, bands, whatever, not are in Cannes. And I'd go 1 year, 2 years. And 1 year, I actually hired an attorney to represent me in the band because he knew people I didn't
Hmm.
know. And he came to me, says to me, "What are you doing for dinner?" Nothing. He said, "All right, come on, join me for dinner. You're going to meet the Gypsy Kings." I said, "Who?" I said, "The Gypsies." He said, "The real ones?" Yeah, because he said, "Yeah, I know them. They're, who was a client." And so I did. So we went to, I actually had got to go to dinner with the Gypsy Kings. And I'll never forget it, which
Oh, that must have been so exciting
well,
for you.
it was certainly full circle. And I remember, I didn't know what to say or do. I mean, it's like, and Pichai Reyes, who's the lead singer of Gypsy Kings, who didn't speak English, through my attorney, said to me, "Who are you with?" And I said, "We're bandoleros, you don't know us, so." "No, I know who you are," he says. I said, "Really?" He says, "Yes, we pay attention to the people who are doing our music." And he pulled me to the side. He
Hmm.
said, "No, don't tell Nikolai, who's the other been singer. You do some of our songs better than we do,"
Oh, how
which is a
nice.
great, anyway, to make a long story short, where I thought never would be never, we ended up
Hmm.
forming a relationship with the Gypsy Kings, and the band was invited to Toulouse to their studio, where we recorded two of our original songs with them, and it's on the
Hmm.
CDs. It was great. It wasn't, 15 years ago, but it was a turning point, and not that we ever became superstars, but
Yeah.
it was a culmination of, the effort of copying somebody's music and then performing with them, and I thought that was a great solution, a great result,
Yeah.
if you will.
And what's so nice about that is sometimes they say never meet your heroes.
I didn't
and,
intend to, I tell
and
you,
yeah, but sometimes when you do, I mean, I met Peter Torg
right?
in person.
The best.
He was horrible. He was so
See,
mean.
that's it.
He was the rudest, most ugliest human being
Isn't that amazing?
I've ever dealt with. And I've ever since then it was always never meet your
Well,
heroes.
it's funny because we talked briefly in the beginning. I was at a car show because I'm in the classic car business, not the Segway. And I was at a car show in Florida, and there was a $1.2 million Mercedes for sale. I mean, it was gorgeous, way
Mhm.
beyond my, you know, means or whatever. But the owner of that car was Adam Levine from the Maroon 5.
Oh, okay,
So I
okay.
went up to
As
him.
you can tell, my popular music
Okay,
stops at
well,
around
Adam Levine is Maroon
1992.
5. So I went up to him and I said, "Adam, I'm Ron Levine." And he says, "You mean Levine?" I said, "No, Levine." He says, "It's Levine. I'm more popular than you are." I said, you got it. So I did get to meet him, and we had an exchange of namesakes. That was kind of funny. But yes, you never know how they're going to react and how these people are. In the printing industry, I have printed over the years tour books for concerts. And
Yeah.
I mean, I've been to Rolling Stones, Elton John, Michael Jackson. And people think, well, I know Mick Jagger. I don't know Mickey Mouse because I'm dealing with the merchandisers. And I go to a Rolling Stones concert. I would buy my tickets like everybody else. And people say, can you get
Mhm.
tickets? I said, no, I don't know Mick Jagger. And I would produce their books, and it was a lot of fun because, again, I never got to meet the stars per se, but it sort of put me in that. When I went to sell other different products, I
Mhm.
was successful by association. Oh, you do Mick
Yeah.
Jagger, you do Rolling Stones, you must be, some sort. So I became. It was the same thing with the Clio Awards. I produced the
Mhm.
Clio Award books. I asked them to go up there. I actually would go to the Clio Award shows because I would like the design concepts that I always see from some of the top agencies in the world. And
Mhm.
I went and asked them to buy a book one day after one of the shows in 1987. They didn't have one. And I said to myself, well, I said, this has got to be some opportunity here somewhere. And I actually made a deal with them to produce their books. And I said, it won't
Mhm.
cost you a penny. I'll do the books. I'll take up, we'll sell them at the shows and I'll take a royalty. You can get a royalty. I just want access to all the content. And we did.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a question. I never made any money on the books, but I was by association the printer for Clio. And because of that, I could walk into any agency in New York and get an audience, again, before internet.
Yeah.
And where I could call those agencies till I was blue in the face and never ever get any respect or because I was just another printer. But now being a printer for Clio, I recognized that was going to be a good segue into getting into other business. And so I would
Mhm.
say there is a takeaway from that. Credibility is everything. Referral is everything.
Yeah.
Um, I always, even today, I mean, obviously with eBay and with auction, people want, leave feedback. Well, why do you think that is? It's the
Mhm.
same thing we did in the 70s and 80s. We wanted people to
Yeah.
talk good about us to other people, spread the word.
Yeah. And I think there's a lot of truth in that. Sometimes, as executives, as professionals, you might even catch these wonderful, things, but we forget because we're so busy working and we're not really talking about our wins or our accomplishments or pulling in those big names. You might even feel like, oh, maybe I'm bragging if I pull that up. But the truth is, it does give you that credibility and it does mean something.
No question. I mean, yeah, you're as good as the association of people you keep. And
Yeah, it's that proximity.
of course, but by building relationships with the people you are dealing with, you're much more likely when someone calls them, oh, of course I know Ron, whatever. Yeah, absolutely. We're dealing with him for years. As opposed to,
Mhm.
well, who was he? I'm not trying to look him up on my business card file and say, that's what I'm talking about. It's just not,
Yeah,
it's not something that I don't know how to do it any other way. I mean, to me, it was always about,
yeah,
you know, um, being a fisherman and a guy who had a fish on the wall. That's just the way it is. I mean, that's
yeah.
the way I went into business and did my business. But I learned a lot, doing it. And it was an interesting time. And I've always had, because when I was 6 years old, I always admired other people, cars and things of that nature. Always wanted a 1957 Thunderbird. Always wanted a 1968 Mustang. I said, well, one day, and fortunately, I was able to get those, and I do have them today. But
Mhm.
I've always had a classic car, and we bought a home in Saugatuck, Michigan, which is about 2 hours from Chicago.
Mhm.
And I brought the cars up there, and I said, well, as long as I'm storing up there, I might as well make it a business. And so I opened up Investment Classics, and we bought and sold
Yeah.
cars, and we still do. And we do a lot of memorabilia as well. We do a lot of signed memorabilia, I guess, from my era, music era, whatever. Um, I collect a lot of signed Beatles albums, a lot of sports,
Mhm.
Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan's children and my kids went to school together for
Hmm.
8 years in Highland Park. And I found it always very fascinating that in 8 years, Michael would, this is during the height of the championships, by the way, I never saw anybody ask him for an autograph in 8 years. And I think because we treated him like a father, he came to the
Hmm.
school functions. And not one father or friend of mine that I know ever missed a function because Michael was there. And they had the greatest attendance for 8 years. But the thing about that is that um, he would always sit and talk basketball, but nobody ever crossed
Yeah.
that line. And again, you built a relationship based on not who he was, but who we were and who we were
Yeah.
together. It wasn't, oh, you're Michael Jordan, or you bow down. Everybody thought that, but nobody went that direction. And I
Hmm.
think because of that, he was a much more comfortable in that environment. I remember the only
Yeah.
signed memorabilia I got. He was donated a signed basketball to the kids for cheerleading uniforms, and I think I paid $1,200 for it. He was genuinely embarrassed that it got sold for $1,200 in his presence. And I thought that was, you just see other sides of people when you're talking about celebrities, whatever. I
Yeah.
always thought Michael was just a stand-up guy, just the way it
Yeah.
was.
Now, you're a repeat client of ours, and we've even worked with your wife.
Yes.
Your careers have had so many twists.
Hmm.
How have you navigated that reinvention over the decades, and what keeps you coming back
Passion,
for more?
passion. I think you must have a for what you want to do. I think if you don't really truly enjoy what you're doing, don't do it. People, and I've told this to a lot of people, if you get up in the morning with your job and you dread going there, find a different job. Ultimately, if you have that distaste for what you're physically doing, you will never have a full time from your life. It wasn't printing that made me, happy every morning. It was dealing with the people. I enjoyed the
Yeah.
people I worked with, and I could have sold them anything. I could have been selling them, pickle jars. It didn't make a difference.
Were you ever scared to change? Were you
Always,
ever scared to reinvent yourself?
always, because I had confidence in myself that I could talk to people. But again, you really have to know what you're talking about. And I had to learn that as we go. I mean, someone said to me, "Well, you must be able to fix cars." I haven't a clue how to fix a car. I know what I like.
Mm-hmm.
I know what their values are. I can find you the right car for you and make sure, and I have the right people that know how to fix cars and can evaluate what the car's worth. And so I bring the expertise of others. I think another lesson to be learned here is surround yourself with the people that can complement what you don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's an essential part of being successful. You don't know it all, and I certainly don't know it all, and I didn't have the patience to learn it all. But you find the right people. I've had people working with me or for me for 35, 40 years. And consequently, I think that we bring a package together. I certainly don't bring it alone at all.
Now, Ron, what's one big dream that you're chasing next?
Well, Donna, someone said to me, what do you do for a living? I'm 79 years old. My answer is one day, because it changes. Every opportunity. I guess even today, I never know what tomorrow's going to be. I think I've done a lot. I have done quite a
You
bit.
have done a lot.
I mean, for example, just briefly, we live in an area in Chicago called Old Town. Well, Old Town and Second
Mhm.
City I can walk to Second City. I grew up in Chicago. I know what Second City is. But this is a foundation of comedy in the United States for sure. But there was a sign on the door and it said stand up comedy classes, Second City. And I said, well,
Mhm.
damn. I said, I never thought about that. And I have not thought about that, nor did I ever envision myself being a stand up comic. But on the other hand, I like to tell jokes. I started dreaming of that idea. And you know what? Was it interesting getting in front of an audience the first time and doing material? Yeah. I'm glad I did it.
Mhm.
And it's fun. And you know what? One of the classes, by the way, Second City, the second class I took after it was called storytelling. And the story I told you was the one I told on stage. And it always resonates because regardless of what age you are, people can relate to relationships. And I don't care strictly business. I'm talking about dating. I'm talking about anything. It's all about relationships. It's all about selling yourself and having a comfort level with the person you're with. That's it. Yeah.
Wonderful. Ron, thank you so much for joining us
My
today.
pleasure.
I
Thank
so
you.
appreciated this phone call.
I appreciate it. I
Thank
think it was
you.
great. And I look forward to working with you in the future.